Hello, hello. Today I want to talk about the topic of self-sufficiency, a life without conditions. Well, as one may actually put it, more like a life with different kind of conditions. And yeah, I guess what sparked me to want to talk about this is my partner and I run a rather large off-grid sort of Facebook group. And yeah, and obviously there's a lot of people on there collaborating together, trying to look for community, trying to live a more self-sustaining lifestyle, and that can look different for a lot of different people. So what I'm sharing here is no way, shape or form my saying of maybe what my vision of self-sufficiency is what your vision of self-sufficiency is. But I don't want to let that stop me from sharing, I guess, my perspectives and some things to maybe for you to consider. One thing I think is quite important is obviously when I say, self-sufficiency might be more in line with, living with conditions, but those conditions are more in line with maybe who you are and what you're here to do. Whereas, I guess, self-reliancy, you may tend to head away further from conditions that are actually in alignment with who you are and, like I said, what you're here to do. So also want to mention it is good to remember and to be careful not to, I guess, confuse self-sufficiency with, hyper individualism, and that, because that can obviously lead to quite an unhealthy path of one's life. I'm also not saying that if you feel you need to go live alone for the rest of your life somewhere else where you'll never see another human again, I'm not here to question that. That's completely up to you. But most of us here living in this space, the planet as I guess we may call it, are here to actually collaborate with others. And I guess in order to do that, we have to think about sort of community living. And because community living is usually quite essential to, I guess, the health and wellness of the human. Usually. I'm not going to say that that's a blanket rule, but usually, hence why I guess people tend to gravitate towards, I guess, places like townships and cities, even though they may be sometimes a bit of an inversion of what community potentially is, that's healthy for us. Unconsciously, people will gravitate towards other people. I'm not saying that is the blanket rule for everybody though. So anyway, and I guess, when I think about self-sufficiency, I think of terms like simplicity, growing food, homemade local items, slow rural living, reusing items, sort of more mindful consumption of what it is that one's using. And I guess the reasons as to why self-sufficiency can be quite important to start embodying, if you're not already doing so, is one, happiness. Not saying that you should strive to do everything in life that makes you happy, but I'm sure many of you are aware that ultra materialism does not always lead to happiness. Can actually make you further unhappy, potentially. I'm just saying that, Number two, health. When you think about if you're growing a lot of your own nutrition, slower living, you're living more in nature, you've got like local connections, that can really help with that sort of mind, body, spirit, emotions, all those sort of aspects of one's being. Number three I want to talk about is environment. So the great thing about living more sustainably is that you're actually able to see a lot more of what it is that you do and how that impacts the immediate environment in which you live in. When you often think about city living, when you're creating things like rubbish or supposed recycling, you don't really sort of see what happens to that unless you live in certain parts of the world where, yes, you do see what happens to that. But when you live in, I guess, a white Western sort of modern civilization city, that sort of gets collected and it's out of sight, out of mind. Same again with things like when you're using water for showering and all the other cleaning things that you do, you know, toilets, all of that sort of stuff. It's sort of, you know, it's taken away, exited from the house, and you don't really get to see. And I'm not saying that you should be looking literally at your SHIT every day, but when you're having to be more self-sufficient and how to, I guess, remove certain things from your immediate living space, you actually start to be a lot more, I guess, aware of what it is that you're consuming and then what it is that you're supposedly wasting. And some things you can think of starting to create more sort of closed loop systems, and obviously that can potentially be beneficial to your immediate environment. Number 4, financial. So sometimes a self-sufficient lifestyle may lead you in a path where you may earn less money, whatever. I'm just saying this is sometimes what happens. However, sometimes you actually end up living in a lifestyle where you require less money anyway, or less resources, external sort of resources, as we may call it. And I guess the reason for that is your living costs can, I'm not saying they will, but they can go down. And you're kind of exiting out of, I guess some people would call it the rat race, in which one can kind of get stuck in. So yes, there is some financial aspects to obviously being more self-sufficient. Now, number 5 is, as some may call it, external shock proofing. And I'm sure some people will think of prepping and all of that sort of jazz as soon as I sort of say that, but you know, that has its own benefits. Why cannot one create a life in which they are less affected by external environments such as financial and social trends? You know, if you want to be on the financial and social trend bandwagon, that's absolutely up to you. I'm not here to judge. But if you do not wish to partake in those parts of society as much as maybe some others do, well, you know, being more self-sufficient can help shock-proof that sort of external environment of the financial and social trends. And you can, I guess, maintain more of a stability, if you want to call it. Not that anything's really ever always stable, but you're not wrapped up in trends, I guess. And sometimes trends can kind of pull us out of our alignment of who we are and what we're here to do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they help you find things about yourself that maybe you didn't know. So yeah, I'm not saying it's necessarily all a bad thing to be on a financial and social trend. But yeah, external shock proofing is a potential benefit that can come from being more self-sufficient. And then the last one to talk about is number 6, and that is time. So time is a funny thing, I always say. And I guess the thing with the time is you're getting to spend your energy on investments that may mean more to you, your family, your friends, your community. You know, you're spending less time, I guess, on things that maybe you don't like, or maybe that you find are not very in alignment with who you are and what you need to do. So yeah, self-sufficiency can really force you or gravitate you towards spending time on things that maybe you really enjoy and that you really value. Not just, like I said, for yourself, but the external self of, you know, the other humans, the environment, the animals, the plants, all that sort of jazz. And so I guess where now I'm getting to is, well, where does one start if maybe you're already on that path or you're nowhere near well, you may consider you're nowhere near of, you know, being self-sufficient or where you want to be. I mean, it can, should I say, be a continual process. Like, you might get to where you think self-sufficiency is for you, and then maybe a number of supposedly linear years down the track, you think, oh, actually, I'd like to change that system, or I'd like to do that more differently. And so that can change and adapt. And one does not have to be very strict and stringent. It's often a matter of coming to a place where you feel like you can actually start, instead of going to this sort of ideal perfectionism that one can sometimes create. And so obviously guidance and community is are good tools for you to use, for your personal self-sufficiency journey. And like I said, there's many different sort of shades of self-sufficiency and what that can look like. Obviously, it's a good idea to talk to people that you actually know that are living in a lifestyle in which you, I guess, value, that really inspire you. Maybe they might have certain workshops or talks, that they are presenting. You could reach out. Maybe you could go to a workshop. Maybe they have a free online talk or something, and you could sit down and watch it. Maybe they might even be someone that you're reasonably close with, and you can actually just have a conversation, invite them over for dinner or go visit them, things like that, and just sort of get that conversation started. Obviously the internet has a range of information. It's the age of information, which sometimes can be, we're not very mature sometimes when it comes to using this information. There's different sort of levels. Again, don't really want to put things into levels, but information is potentially one thing, knowledge is another, and wisdom is a whole other. So yeah, using your discernment obviously can be quite important. But yeah, if you can obviously get connected with people like-minded that maybe have very similar values to you, you can start talking about creating something together, which can be good. Or if you feel like it's something you want to just start doing for yourself and your family, then obviously you can just start doing that and see who comes and who gravitates themselves towards you to collaborate on with something. Doing something like this together with people has its ups and downs. I've talked about before the sort of importance of interpersonal skills, and a lot of that obviously is developed through knowing who you are in sort of every moment that you can, and knowing what you can work with and what you are yet to be able to work with, and or maybe there's just some flat out no's, things that you just definitely don't want to have within your sort of idea of community. So yes, that's definitely very important. And the thing with coming together is sometimes you can pull in resources, whether it be financial or physical items, that obviously can help with getting a community sort of started. But you can just go from moving from the city to moving to a very small town. That could just be a step in that sort of process. So yes, it varies a lot from person to person. And don't get stuck on some idea of perfectionism. Don't get stuck on if someone's putting you down because, I don't know, you're not living their life of self-sufficiency. Sometimes they're not even anywhere near where maybe you are in your self-sufficiency journey, and the fact that sometimes people would just want to put you down because they're jealous. And often, there's obviously a difference between like constructive criticism and just flat out people you don't know just saying things to, I guess, invoke certain emotions within you and make them feel good about themselves. And yeah, that's a whole other topic. I don't really need to go into that. So yeah, like the many shades of one's self-sufficiency journey is obviously going to vary a lot depending on, your own mental and emotional intelligence. Like I said, sort of coming back to that interpersonal skills, your life experience, like the geography, where are you, what sort of culture have you been brought up, what sort of like traumas and and programs and things have you got installed in yourself? What sort of skills have you obtained? What sort of like economy are you sitting in? What sort of like financial situation, and what sort of idea of freedom do you have, and do you feel that you don't have, and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I hope I've invoked a few sort of ponderings, maybe a few rememberings within this. You're more than welcome to leave your comments in the comment section down below. anything maybe you want to ask, anything you want to add. If you do want to join the Soft Grid Facebook group that my partner and I are like, I'm more like an admin. I mean, he was the sort of creator of it, I guess. You're welcome to reach out. Actually, I might just leave the link for that in the description box down below. So yeah, you can join that. We just sort of have one rule, and that's just to focus on creating your own beautiful world. Don't get too caught up with the supposed downfalls of society. That's also a good thing to note, is like your intentions for self-sufficiency. It's a good thing to really sit with, because when someone goes into something with the idea of maybe trying to avoid something, trying to get away from something, or they're just like, I guess, maybe sitting in an emotional sort of vibration of, I guess, not expansion, but quite contracted, with the sort of emotions of maybe hate, fear, anger, all that sort of stuff. And when you go into doing it, it doesn't even matter if it's a part of self-sufficiency, but even just anything you do, you may find that the reciprocity or what you get back is not always very expansive. So, you really got to actually start looking at those things within inside yourself too. Like, what is your intention as to becoming self-sufficiency? Is it because you're afraid of X, Y, Z impacting your life? Or is it because you just want to create X, Y, Z in your life? So yeah, it really depends on what your focus is, and as to how your journey can really go, and what you'll end up attracting in that journey. So yeah, that's it for me now, and I will see you soon.